You probably never imagined a cleaning lady falling asleep on a toilet lid, only to be caught by the hotel's billionaire CEO, and instead of getting fired, she ends up flying to Paris with him? What made a cold, powerful man fall for a woman who had nothing but her honesty? And why did the whole world suddenly turn against them? This story will make you believe sometimes being different is exactly what changes your life forever. If you love emotional, life-changing stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a single episode. In a city where wealth gleamed from every high-rise window and no one noticed the people who cleaned their floors, Hannah Rivera was invisible. She worked quietly, tirelessly, day shift scrubbing guest rooms, night shift covering for a coworker with endless excuses. No overtime, no sympathy, no sleep, just a paycheck barely enough to cover rent for her and her younger brother. That evening, the luxury suite on the top floor was her last stop. The guest hadn't arrived yet, which meant she could work quickly and get home before midnight. Her arms ached from scrubbing tile, her eyelids heavy as curtains at the end of a play. She pushed the cart into the suite's marble-tiled bathroom, a space so large and gleaming it looked more like a museum than a place someone would actually use. Gold fixtures, fresh orchids, designer soap. She couldn't help but mutter, "Who needs a bathroom this fancy? You could fit my whole apartment in here." Twice. She sprayed disinfectant into the sink, wiped down the counters, bent to polish around the tub. The scent of lavender and lemon filled the air. Just a minute, she told herself, just a second to rest. She lowered herself onto the edge of the toilet, laid her forehead gently on her folded arms, and closed her eyes. The silence was soothing. She didn't mean to fall asleep, but she did. And 5 minutes later, or maybe it was 15, the suite's front door clicked open. Everett Blake had just finished a brutal day of investor meetings, presentations, and phone calls that drained even his iron patience. As CEO of the Grand Blake Regency Hotel, he carried the weight of a billion-dollar empire on his shoulders. The suite on the top floor, his personal retreat, was the only place in the world where he could breathe without judgment. He loosened his tie as he walked in, the sound of his Italian leather shoes soft against the thick carpet. His blazer was off before he even reached the bedroom. All he wanted was a hot shower, a moment of peace. He pushed open the door to the bathroom and stopped. His hand froze mid-reach for the light switch, his brow furrowed. There, in the gleaming, spotless bathroom, someone was slumped over, her frame curled like a question mark on top of the closed toilet lid. A woman, young, in a faded hotel housekeeping uniform. Her brown hair was pulled into a messy bun, loose strands falling across her cheek. Her arms cradled her head like a pillow, and her chest rose and fell in the slow rhythm of sleep. Everett's eyes widened. He stumbled back, startled. What in the... It wasn't the fact that someone had broken in. The suite was monitored and secured. No, she looked too exhausted to have broken in, too lost. He leaned closer. She hadn't noticed him. She didn't flinch. Just kept sleeping, breathing lightly, as if this ridiculous spot was the only peace she'd known in days. Everett didn't know what to do. He stood in the doorway, one hand on the gold-plated door handle, watching this stranger, this ghost of labor, curled up in the corner of a life that didn't belong to her. And then she stirred. A sudden noise, a shift in the silence, the low hum of footsteps, pulled Hannah from the fragile cocoon of sleep. Her eyelids fluttered, heavy and confused. For a second, she didn't know where she was. Then she remembered. The suite, the bathroom, and the terrible truth, she had fallen asleep on the job. Her body tensed, her heart lurched. She bolted upright, too fast. Her cleaning bucket tipped over with a loud clang, and a bottle of glass cleaner clattered across the marble floor. She turned toward the doorway and froze. A man stood there, tall, sharp suit hanging open over a crisp white shirt, no tie, tousled dark hair, and eyes, blue as winter lakes, fixed directly on her with an expression that flickered between disbelief and something else. Hannah scrambled to her feet. Her voice cracked out of her like a broken light bulb. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to fall asleep. I didn't steal anything. I swear I was just cleaning. And the man raised one brow, more surprised than angry. On the toilet? I was exhausted. I sat down for a second and her voice cracked. Oh no, I didn't mean. Please, don't fire me. I need this job. Please. She stood there, cheeks flushed, eyes wide, shoulders hunched in shame. The yellow gloves she still wore made her feel ridiculous, like a child in trouble for something much worse than a nap. But the man didn't yell. He didn't even raise his voice. Instead, after a long pause, he let out a breath and said softly, "You're shaking." I... She looked down. Her hands were trembling. "I'm fine." "You're not," he replied. "You look like you haven't slept in days." She swallowed hard, not sure if he was angry or something else entirely. "I work a lot of shifts," she said quietly. "Day and night, I didn't mean any harm." There was another silence. Then he asked, "What's your name?" She blinked. "Hannah. Hannah Rivera." He gave a short nod. "Everett Blake." Her breath caught. Her stomach dropped. "Blake, as in Blake Hotel, as in the man who signs my paycheck." "Oh God," she whispered. "You're him." Everett stepped forward, arms folded loosely, eyes narrowing with curiosity rather than judgment. "What kind of person works themselves to the point of passing out in a bathroom?" he asked. She blinked at him. "The kind who has bills." His lips twitched, just barely. A crack in the CEO mask. Something almost like amusement. Then without another word, he turned and walked into the suite's small kitchen. Hannah stood frozen. What was happening? Then his voice floated back. "Do you drink coffee?" Hannah hesitated in the doorway of the suite's kitchen, unsure if she should run, cry, or follow the man who could either fire her or, what, offer her a drink? Everett stood at the counter, already pouring steaming liquid into two delicate porcelain cups. The contrast between his refined movements and her trembling hands felt so stark she almost laughed. What was she doing here? She stepped in cautiously, her rubber soles squeaking slightly against the floor. "You don't have to make me coffee," she said, still trying to make sense of it all. Everett didn't look up. "It's not a courtesy. It's a test." Hannah frowned. "A test?" He finally turned, offering her a cup. "Tell me what's wrong with it." Still confused, Hannah took the mug. She sniffed the coffee and immediately made a face. "It smells burnt, like the beans were over-roasted, and they probably reheated it after brewing, which is why it's bitter. Someone dumped sugar in it to fix it, but it just made it taste like charred syrup." Everett blinked. "That's very specific," he said. "It's just bad coffee," she muttered, setting the cup down. "No," he said slowly. "It's more than that. You didn't just say it was bad. You knew why it was bad." She shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "I grew up helping my mom at her diner, learned how to taste early." Everett crossed his arms, studying her like she was a new investment. "So you clean bathrooms by day and identify poorly brewed coffee by scent in your spare time?" "It's not a skill anyone's hiring for," she replied flatly. He didn't smile, but something shifted in his expression. "Maybe they should be," he said. Hannah's eyebrows lifted. "Wait, what?" Everett set his cup down and walked toward her, not menacing but purposeful. "The breakfast service in this hotel is abysmal," he said. "I've fired 3 chefs in the past year, and still the food is mediocre, but you..." He pointed at the untouched cup. "You figured out in 2 seconds what the kitchen couldn't fix in 2 years." Her heart started to thump. "I'm not a chef," she protested. "I'm barely even qualified to mop your floors." "No," he said, "you're overqualified." Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Hannah didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Then Everett leaned slightly forward and said the most unexpected thing. "Tomorrow morning, you're coming with me to the kitchen." She stared at him. "To do what? Mop under the stove?" "To taste," he said, "to evaluate." "You want me to be your food spy?" He tilted his head. "Call it whatever you like, but I have a feeling your palate is more valuable than half my culinary staff." She should have said no. She wanted to say no. But something inside of her, a spark that had been dim for so long, flickered to life. And Hannah, exhausted and terrified, said the one word that would change everything. "Okay." The kitchen was chaos even at dawn. Stainless steel surfaces gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights. Pots clanged, orders barked, and somewhere in the back, A cook cursed after burning his hand. Hannah stepped into the storm of sizzling pans and shouting chefs with shoulders squared and nerves stretched thin. Everett walked just a few steps ahead of her, crisp and calm as always. He moved through the flurry like he belonged there, which he did. She, on the other hand, felt like an imposter wearing a borrowed name tag. Standing by the central prep table was a man built like a butcher block, broad, scowling, and in a pristine white coat. He was already glaring at her. "This is the girl?" he said without preamble, his tone thick with doubt. "This," Everett replied, "is Hannah, and she's here to help fix your breakfast." The chef, Eduardo, according to the gold nameplate pinned to his chest, gave a short, humorless laugh. "We don't need help from housekeeping." Everett didn't blink. "You need help from someone. Your last 3 menus read like a college cafeteria." Eduardo's eyes narrowed. "With all due respect, sir, I run a professional kitchen. I don't take advice from amateurs." Hannah felt a heat rise in her cheeks. Not anger, but humiliation. She didn't want to be here. She didn't ask for this. "I'm not here to take over," she said quickly, her voice quiet but clear. "I just noticed some things. That's all." Eduardo crossed his arms. "Then let's hear them." Hannah looked at the spread on the prep counter. There were samples of the hotel's typical breakfast fare: scrambled eggs, toast, a bowl of mixed fruit, and a stack of pancakes that looked perfectly golden on the outside. She hesitated, then stepped forward. She picked up a fork and took a bite of the eggs, chewed, frowned. "They're dry, like you cooked them too fast over too high a heat. And the butter you're using isn't real butter. It's a blend, probably to save money." Eduardo said nothing, but his jaw tightened. Hannah tried a slice of toast next. "Bread's not fresh. It was either stored wrong or made yesterday. The texture's off. Too dry in the middle, too chewy on the crust." Next, the fruit bowl. "The melon isn't ripe. The pineapple's turning. You're either buying low grade or not checking your deliveries." And finally, the pancakes. They looked perfect, but the moment she cut into them, the center revealed a slight gumminess. "Undercooked," she said. "Someone's rushing the flip." Silence. Then slowly Everett turned to Eduardo. "Well?" Eduardo stared at her, and for a moment Hannah braced for a snarl. Instead, the chef exhaled through his nose, a long, reluctant breath. "She's not wrong," he muttered. Everett smiled just slightly. "Then it's settled. Hannah will assist with improving the menu." Eduardo frowned, clearly not thrilled. "What exactly does that mean?" Everett clapped his hands once. "It means she eats, tastes, gives notes, and you," he gestured to the kitchen. "Listen." Hannah wanted to run, but she also wanted to prove that this odd, terrifying, exhilarating detour in her life wasn't a mistake. She nodded. "I'll do my best." The next morning, the kitchen was quieter, but only on the surface. Underneath the hush of pre-service prep, Hannah could feel the tension humming like an electric wire. She was supposed to taste and give notes, but judging by the way the staff eyed her, like she was either a spy or a joke, it was clear that not everyone had accepted her new role. Eduardo was the first to acknowledge her arrival. He didn't smile, but he didn't glare either. That was progress. "Start with the eggs," he said, sliding a small plate her way without looking up from his clipboard. Hannah picked up a fork, took a bite, and paused. The texture was better, softer, creamier. "You switched to low heat," she said. Eduardo glanced at her, then nodded. "Used cream instead of milk and real butter." She smiled. "It shows." The staff didn't say anything, but she noticed the way a few heads turned, and stayed turned, one dish down. Next came the toast, golden, warm, crispy on the outside, but soft inside. "Fresh bread?" "Baked at 3 a.m. to Burishim," Eduardo muttered, as if it physically hurt to admit he'd changed anything based on her opinion. Hannah took another bite and tried not to let the grin show. Then came the fruit salad. She took a taste, then looked up, surprised. "You use lime juice." Eduardo's lips twitched. "Keeps the color fresh and adds flavor. And balances the sweetness," she added softly. He nodded again. This time slower, more thoughtful. The change was subtle, but it was happening, one breakfast at a time. By the third day, the entire kitchen dynamic had shifted. Eduardo no longer barked orders the moment Hannah walked in. Instead, he asked questions. "Try this sausage blend. Too spicy?" Is this yogurt base too tangy? Too many herbs in the potatoes? Hannah found herself answering confidently, not because she was trying to prove anything, but because she genuinely knew. She didn't have a culinary degree, but she had a palate. And every time she identified an issue, and Eduardo adjusted a dish based on her notes, something in the room changed. A flicker of respect. It wasn't just Eduardo. One by one, the staff started to nod at her in the hallway. A dishwasher offered her a cup of tea. A line cook passed her a fork and asked for her opinion. And then one morning, as she was heading out of the kitchen after another round of tastings, she passed Everett in the hallway. He didn't say anything at first, just stopped, looked at her. "You're different," he finally said. Hannah raised a brow. "In a good way?" He nodded. "In a very good way." She wanted to say something back, something clever, maybe, but before she could find the words, he added quietly, "This place is better because of you." Then he walked away, and just like that, her world tilted again. By the end of the week, Hannah's name was on everyone's lips, but not always for the reasons she wanted. The whispers had started as faint murmurs in the background, barely noticeable, but now they followed her like perfume in the hotel corridors, lingering in the air long after she'd passed. "She's the one who fell asleep in his bathroom. I heard she's got something going on with the CEO. She's not even a chef, just a maid with a pretty face." Hannah heard it all, in the break room, behind laundry carts, even while she folded linens in the staff quarters. Everyone had an opinion, and most of them weren't kind. She didn't mind hard work. She didn't mind being underestimated. But this was different. It was her integrity they were tearing apart, as if her only currency was the attention of a man like Everett Langston. It all came to a head when she walked into the staff lounge one afternoon and found Julia, the front desk receptionist with a knack for passive-aggressive compliments, lounging with a coffee in hand. "Well, well," Julia drawled, not bothering to hide the smirk on her lips. "Look who's suddenly dining with kings." Hannah didn't slow her pace. "I taste food, Julia. I'm not crowning anyone." "Right," Julia snorted, "because Everett Langston personally asks every hotel maid to evaluate the chef's menu." Hannah turned to face her, calmly, firmly. "I didn't ask for this. I'm just doing what I was asked to do." Julia leaned forward. "Come on. We all saw the way he looks at you." The silence that followed was thick. Then Hannah said softly, "Maybe he looks at me that way because I told him the truth when no one else would." And she walked away. But the moment she stepped into the hallway, Everett was there, leaning casually against the wall, sleeves rolled up, looking every bit like a man who didn't belong in the realm of doubt. "Interesting timing," he said. She blinked. "Were you listening?" "I wasn't trying to," he said, straightening, "but walls aren't exactly soundproof." She sighed. "I guess you know about the rumors." "I've known since Tuesday." Hannah crossed her arms, heart tight in her chest. "And?" Everett looked at her, his voice even. "Do you want me to stop asking for your help?" She shook her head slowly. "No." "Then ignore the noise," he said gently. "We have work to do. And if it makes people uncomfortable that someone with actual talent gets recognized, that's their problem." His words were firm, assured. But his eyes, they told a different story. There was something there, something softer. Hannah's voice lowered. "Is this about the food, or is it more?" Everett didn't flinch. He didn't deflect. Instead, he said quietly, "What if it's both?" The city lights glimmered like scattered diamonds outside the grand windows of Everett's penthouse office. Hannah had never seen a place so immaculate, so devoid of mess or chaos. Everything had its place, except perhaps her. She stood near the window, arms folded, unsure of why she'd come. Maybe it was to clear the air. Maybe it was to ask the question that had been keeping her awake at night. Or maybe it was to understand the man whose eyes had started to feel like home. Everett walked in moments later, a tablet in one hand, tie loosened, hair slightly disheveled, the kind of mess that made him look even more unreachable. He paused when he saw her. "You came." "I shouldn't have," she whispered, "but I did." He set the tablet down, his movements deliberate. "You don't have to explain." "I do." She turned to face him. "Because something's happening, and if we keep pretending it isn't, It's going to destroy whatever chance we had of keeping things professional. Everett exhaled, long and low, and moved to pour himself a glass of water. I never asked you to keep it professional. That's the problem, she said, barely louder than a breath. You never asked. You never said anything. You just look at me like I matter. But you've never explained why. He paused, turned, and for the first time, Hannah saw something she hadn't before. Fear. I've never explained, he said slowly, because I don't know how. She blinked. Try. He sat across from her, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. The CEO mask was gone. In its place sat a man, just a man, haunted by things he hadn't said aloud. When I was 12, he began, voice rough, my mother cleaned houses. She'd come home every night with burns on her hands from scrubbing hotel bathtubs. My father left early, didn't look back, so it was just me and her. She used to tell me that even if the world didn't give us a place, we could carve one out ourselves. Hannah didn't interrupt. She didn't move. She just listened. I built Langston hotels for her, he continued, so she'd never have to lift a mop again. But she didn't live long enough to see any of it. A pause. And now I spend my life surrounded by people who wear masks, who tell me what I want to hear, who think my name means something more than what I am. He looked up at her then, eyes filled with a fragile kind of truth. Then you walked in, into my bathroom of all places, sleeping on a toilet like you owned the world. She let out a soft, tearful laugh. And in that ridiculous moment, I felt something shift, because you didn't care who I was. You told me the truth. You challenged me. You didn't ask for favors. You earned your place. Silence blanketed the room. And then Hannah stepped closer, close enough to see the faint shadows under his eyes, the lines on his face that no amount of luxury could soften. I don't need you to save me, she whispered. I know, he replied. That's why I fell for you. The grand ballroom of the International Gastronomy Summit shimmered with crystal chandeliers and polished silver. Waiters weaved between tables, balancing trays of artfully crafted hors d'oeuvres, while classical music floated in the air like silk. To an outsider, it was perfection. To Hannah, it was a minefield. She stood by the tall buffet table, eyeing a platter of smoked duck canapes as if they might explode. She was dressed in an elegant midnight blue gown that Carla had picked for her. Tasteful but unforgettable, she'd said. Yet Hannah still felt out of place, as if her borrowed confidence might unravel at the seams with one wrong word. Dylan, no, Everett now, to the world, was deep in conversation across the room with a French investor, his sharp suit immaculate, his gestures confident. He hadn't seen her yet, and part of her didn't want it to him to. Not tonight, not after what she'd just overheard. They'll never last. She's just a Cinderella story. Trade the mop for a wine glass and suddenly she's an expert? The voice was unmistakable, smooth, mocking, honey-laced venom. Madeline. Hannah stiffened. She's not even trained, Madeline continued to another guest. Everett's throwing his reputation into the fire, all because of a girl who was found asleep in a hotel bathroom. The man laughed and the sound clanged inside Hannah's chest, but she didn't walk away. Not this time. Instead, she turned, slow and steady, and approached the pair like a storm wrapped in satin. Madeline, she said, her voice quiet but clear, I'm sure the guests at your table are tired of hearing the same story on repeat. Madeline's smile faltered for half a second before snapping back into place. Oh, Hannah, she purred. I was just telling them how inspiring your rise has been. You mean the version where I'm a nobody who got lucky? Hannah's eyes didn't waver. That narrative's gotten stale. Madeline's companion took a sip of his wine and stepped back, sensing the frost between them. Hannah stepped closer, lowering her voice. Let me guess, you thought if you whispered enough poison into people's ears, they'd turn on me, that Everett would drop me. Madeline's smile cracked. You don't know what you're getting into. This world, his world, has rules. Then maybe it's time someone rewrote them. Before Madeline could reply, a hand touched Hannah's lower back. She turned slightly to see Everett standing beside her, his presence calm but steel strong. Is there a problem here? He asked, his gaze flicking to Madeline with the practiced coldness of a man used to cutting deals and ending them. None at all, Madeline. Madeline said smoothly, but her tone was tight. Just catching up. Good, Everett said, his voice like glass over ice. Because from now on, I expect respect when you speak about the woman I love. The word love hung in the air like a spark. Madeline blinked, then smiled tightly. Of course. She turned and disappeared into the crowd like a shadow chased by light. Hannah stood frozen. Everett turned to her, his voice quieter now. I hope that wasn't too forward. She looked at him, heart pounding. You love me? He nodded once, unblinking. I've tried not to. I've told myself it's too soon, that it's messy. But tonight hearing them talk about you like that, I couldn't stay silent. I won't. Hannah swallowed hard. I didn't come here to be rescued. I know, he said, reaching for her hand. That's why you're the only one I'd ever fight for. Rain tapped gently against the windows of the Paris hotel suite, a soft contrast to the storm brewing inside. Hannah sat on the edge of the couch, her fingers trembling as she held the sleek silver tablet Everett had just handed her. On the screen, a breaking news headline blazed across the top like fire. Scott Hotel CEO accused of nepotism, romance behind recent promotions? Beneath it was a photo, grainy but unmistakable, of her and Everett at the summit the night before. He had his hand gently on her back. She was looking up at him, smiling. In any other context, it would have been a sweet, quiet moment. But with the wrong spin, it became evidence. They're calling me a fraud, Hannah whispered, her throat tight. They think you promoted me because I... She couldn't finish the sentence. Her heart ached too much. Everett stood across the room, jaw clenched, phone in hand, pacing. This isn't coming from the press, not directly. Someone fed them that picture, that story. It's too precise. Madeline, Hannah said softly. He didn't respond, but the look in his eyes was all the confirmation she needed. Everett finally sat across from her, his voice low. They want to make you doubt yourself, and they want me to back away, but I won't. Not now, not ever. But this isn't just gossip anymore, Everett. She looked at him, her voice cracking. This could cost you everything. Investors, partners, they'll start pulling out. Your board won't tolerate a scandal. And she paused, tears welling. I don't want to be the reason you lose what you built. Everett's expression softened, and he reached for her hands. Everything I've built means nothing if I lose you. Hannah shook her head. You're not listening. This isn't about love. It's about damage control. He gripped her hands tighter. It is about love. But you're right, the business side, it's messy now. I can fix that. But not if you disappear on me. She turned her face toward the window, watching the raindrops race each other down the glass. What if me staying just makes it worse? Then we weather the storm, he said simply. Together. Hannah closed her eyes. Part of her wanted to believe that love could be stronger than power, than money, than reputation. But a deeper part of her, the girl who grew up hearing she wasn't worth anything, was afraid, terrified even. The silence stretched between them until Everett stood up again and crossed to the desk. He opened a drawer, pulled out a manila envelope, and held it out to her. She blinked. What's this? Proof, he said quietly, that you earned everything. A full report, internal communications. The truth. No favors, no influence, just your work. If this goes to court or to the press, I want the world to see it. She took the envelope in her hands, but her gaze stayed on his. You knew this could happen, she whispered. And you still brought me here? He nodded. Because I believed in you before the world noticed. And I still do. Tears spilled over her lashes as she stood and wrapped her arms around him. He held her tightly, and in that moment she knew. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't be running anymore. The next morning arrived cloaked in tension. Hannah woke early, her nerves raw and aching. She expected more chaos in the press, more lies, more judgment, more whispers that she was nothing but a glorified maid riding the coattails of a billionaire's favor. What she didn't expect was the knock at the hotel suite door. Everett was still asleep, his arm draped protectively over her waist. She gently slid out from under his arm, padded to the door and opened it. Just a crack. Standing there was an older woman dressed immaculately in a dark plum coat and matching gloves, her white hair pulled into a tight bun. Her eyes, sharp and cool like steel, met Hannah's. "You're Hannah Collins?" she asked. "I, yes," Hannah replied, heart suddenly thudding. The woman extended a hand. "Vivian LaRoche, board member at Scott International. May I come in?" Hannah hesitated, glancing back toward Everett. "He's still sleeping." "I'm not here for Everett. I'm here for you." Hannah stepped aside slowly, allowing the woman to enter. Vivian walked in like she owned the air around her, settling into a velvet chair by the window. She removed her gloves one finger at a time. "I came to Paris to observe," Vivian said. "Not the food event. You." "Me?" Hannah echoed, confused. Vivian nodded. "There's been chatter. The board's concerned. Investors are watching. They think Everett's lost focus. They want to know if he's making decisions with his heart instead of his head." Hannah's stomach turned. "So you're here to confirm that I'm just a mistake?" Vivian chuckled, a dry, quiet sound. "No, I'm here because I've been where you are." That stopped Hannah in her tracks. 40 years ago," Vivian said, looking out the window, "I started as an intern at a textile firm. I was smarter than half the executives there, but they didn't see me. Not until the CEO noticed I could predict market trends better than anyone else on his team. When he promoted me, the rumors started that I had slept my way to the top, that I was a distraction, that I was a pretty face with no substance." Hannah's throat tightened. "What did you do?" "I stayed," Vivian said simply, "and I worked twice as hard to prove them wrong. Eventually, I bought that company." The silence sat heavy between them. "I've been watching you, Miss Collins," Vivian continued. "You have taste, intuition, a sense of detail that can't be taught. The Paris critics who rolled their eyes at you 2 days ago, they're quoting you now. You've made them question their own palates. That's power, my dear." Hannah was stunned. Vivian leaned forward. "The real question is, do you want to keep fighting?" Hannah looked down at her hands. They were still shaking. "I'm tired," she whispered. "You're allowed to be tired," Vivian said gently. "But don't you dare walk away because of fear. You don't just belong here, Hannah. You're needed here. Girls like you, women like us, we don't get handed doors. We kick them open. And sometimes we get bruised doing it." Hannah blinked away tears. "Why are you helping me?" Vivian rose, slipping her gloves back on. "Because when I look at you, I see myself. And maybe I want to believe we've come farther than they want us to think." She started for the door, then paused. "Oh, and one more thing," Vivian said over her shoulder. "The board isn't going to vote Everett out. Not after last night's press conference. They respect his honesty. And now that I've met you, I'm making sure they respect you too." Then she was gone. Hannah stood in the quiet suite, her heart racing in a completely new way. A few moments later, Everett stirred awake and called her name. She walked to the bedroom doorway, her voice steadier than it had been in days. "Everett?" He sat up, eyes heavy with sleep. "Hmm?" She smiled softly. "We're not going anywhere. We're staying." It should have been a triumphant day. Hannah stood at the edge of the rooftop terrace at the newly unveiled Scott Culinary Pavilion, her dress catching the spring breeze that rolled through Paris like a whisper of change. Below, a red carpet stretched across the cobblestone courtyard, leading into the grand hall where the city's finest chefs, critics, and investors were gathering. This wasn't just another event. This was Hannah's event. She had helped plan every detail, from the lineup of tastings to the panel of emerging chefs who were there because she had seen something in them no one else had. It was Everett's idea, but Hannah had shaped it, carved it, breathed life into it, and now it was real. From behind, Everett slipped his hand around her waist, pulling her gently into his side. "You ready?" he asked. She turned toward him, her heart a mixture of nerves and pride. "Not even a little." He grinned. "Good, that's how you know it's worth it." They walked down together, hand in hand, past cameras and microphones and flashing lights. There were no whispered rumors this time, only applause. But the storm hadn't passed. It had only changed form. Halfway through the evening, as Hannah stood at a tasting table explaining flavor balance to a group of culinary school students, Everett's phone buzzed. He frowned and stepped aside to take the call, his brow tightening as he listened. Then his eyes found hers across the room, and Hannah's stomach dropped. She excused herself and hurried to his side. "What is it?" she whispered. He turned the screen toward her, A breaking headline flashed across a major online food publication. Breaking: Scott International accused of rigging chef competition. New star Hannah Collins allegedly orchestrated win. Beneath the headline was a photograph, a candid shot of Hannah laughing beside one of the featured chefs, someone she had helped select. It was harmless. Until now. The article twisted every detail, claimed favoritism, accused Everett of using the pavilion to elevate Hannah's status while manipulating outcomes for media attention. It was vicious and deliberate. Malign. Hannah didn't even have to ask. The fingerprints were all over it. Anonymous sources, doctored timelines, and planted quotes. And worst of all, it was working. Phones buzzed, brows furrowed, people whispered. The room that had once felt like a celebration began to shift. "I need air," Hannah said, her voice thin. Everett reached for her, but she gently stepped away and walked out to the back terrace, where the Paris skyline glowed under a silver moon. She gripped the railing. Hard. It didn't matter what she did, how hard she worked, how much she earned it. The world always seemed ready to tear her back down. But then she heard footsteps behind her. "I'm sorry," Everett said softly. She didn't turn around. "You shouldn't be. This is my fault." "No," he said firmly, stepping beside her. "It's not. It's hers, and she's desperate." Hannah finally looked at him. "I thought if I just worked hard enough, they'd see me." "They do," he said. "You shook this world, Hannah. That's why they're afraid. You didn't play by their rules. You rewrote them." She closed her eyes. "I don't want to fight anymore, Everett." He touched her hand gently. "Then don't fight them. Lead instead." She turned toward him. "Let's hold a press meeting, Shah," he said. "Tonight. Right here. You speak. You set the record straight. Not me, you." Hannah hesitated. "What if I say the wrong thing?" Everett leaned in, voice low and full of certainty. "Then it will still be the most honest thing anyone said all night." She breathed in deep, the fear still there, but no longer stronger than her courage. 30 minutes later, under the stars, with cameras flashing and critics watching, Hannah stood behind the same podium Everett had used weeks ago. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. "I'm not from this world," she began. "I've been called an outsider, a maid, a gold digger, and worse." She paused. "But here's what I am. I'm a woman who knows what it means to struggle. I know what it means to earn every opportunity with sweat and exhaustion. I didn't come here to cheat or climb ladders built by someone else's power. I came here because I have something to offer." She looked at Everett, standing in the crowd, his eyes soft, unwavering. "And I stayed because someone saw it before I did." A hush fell over the terrace. "I didn't rig a competition. I encouraged a new voice to be heard, just like someone did for me. And if that's threatening, then maybe it's time we ask why." She stepped back from the mic. For one long breath, the world held its silence. Then the applause came. Slow at first, then thunderous. And when she turned, Everett was already waiting for her. The applause faded, but the moment stayed. Long after the guests left, after the last light was turned off at the pavilion, after Paris settled into its midnight hush, Hannah lay awake in her hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. Her fingers still tingled from gripping the microphone. Her heart beat slowly now, no longer pounding, but steady, like it finally knew its rhythm. But with the silence came the memories. The scent of bleach from the janitor's closet where she used to nap between shifts. The ache in her feet after scrubbing floor after floor. The sting of tears when guests passed her like she didn't exist. She hadn't been just invisible. She had been dismissed. That girl still lived in her, still remembered every door closed in her face. But tonight, she had opened a door for others. And that, she realized, changed everything. The next morning, Hannah stood at the wide window of the suite, her robe wrapped loosely around her, watching the first light of dawn creep across the Parisian skyline. Everett stirred behind her. "You've been up a while." She nodded but didn't turn. "I keep thinking about where I came from." He joined her at the window, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I think about it too. Every time I look at you, I see both, the woman you are now and the fire it took to become her." She turned in his arms, looking into his eyes. "I want to go home for a while." He didn't flinch. "Home as in?" "My old neighborhood, my family's apartment building." Maybe the old diner where I worked after school. I just need to remember how far I've come. Not for me, but for the girl I used to be. He nodded slowly. Then let's go. And 3 days later, they touched down in New Jersey. No private jet this time. No velvet lounges or champagne carts. Just a quiet return to the streets that raised her. The city smelled like asphalt and fried food. The sidewalk cracks were exactly where she remembered. Even the mailbox on the corner was still dented from where she and her brother used to race bikes and crash into it. She walked slowly, Everett beside her in jeans and a hoodie, blending in without complaint. They passed the corner bodega, the old laundromat, and finally, the building. 4 stories, rusted fire escape, a faded green door. This is it, Wisdom? He asked gently. She nodded, apartment 4C. They didn't go inside. She just stood there, running her hand along the railing. 100 nights on this stoop. 100 dreams she never thought would go anywhere. I remember sitting right here, she whispered, eating stale bread with cheese and praying my mom wouldn't come home crying again. Everett didn't speak. He just sat beside her on the step. I used to think that if I could just get out, it would all make sense. Does it? He asked softly. She turned to him. Not everything, but I think maybe it's not supposed to. Maybe we don't escape the past. Maybe we carry it and it shapes how we hold the future. He took her hand and kissed her fingers. That sounds like something the woman I love would say. She smiled, leaning against his shoulder. Later that afternoon, they stopped by the diner where she used to work. The waitress behind the counter looked tired, overworked, and about 19, just like Hannah once was. She poured coffee into chipped mugs and never looked up. Hannah left a $100 tip with a note. You're more than what you do. I used to sit right here wondering if anyone would ever see me. They will. Until then, don't stop seeing yourself. They left in silence. That night in their hotel room, Hannah looked through old photos she had stored in a dusty shoebox she'd picked up from her mom's place. Her first work badge, a receipt from the diner, a crumpled bus pass, memories of a girl who didn't know she'd someday fly to Paris and bring critics to silence with the truth of her voice. Everett joined her on the floor, barefoot and quiet, watching her as she sifted through the past. You okay? He asked. She nodded, more than okay. I think I needed to see all this, to remind myself that no matter how high I climb, my roots matter. He pulled her close. So what now? She looked at him, and the words came like a whisper from her soul. Now we build something that matters, not just for us, but for every person who's ever been overlooked. He smiled. Together? Always. 3 months later, Hannah stood beneath a silver sign that read, The Hearth Project. It was more than a culinary training center. It was a sanctuary, a space for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds to learn skills, not just in food, but in confidence, in leadership, in hope. Built with the support of the Scott Foundation, designed by Hannah herself. The same girl who once slept on the floor of a supply closet now stood at the helm of something that could change lives. A boy with worn shoes and big eyes tugged at her sleeve. Miss Hannah? She smiled. Yeah? He pointed to a tray of bread rolls. These don't taste right, they smell burnt. She crouched beside him, nodded thoughtfully. You've got a good nose. He beamed, just like she once did. The day began with a question. Do you trust me? Everett asked, standing at the foot of their bed, his hands behind his back and a mischievous glint in his eyes. Hannah narrowed her eyes, still wrapped in the warmth of the sheets. That depends. Last time you asked me that, I ended up riding a camel in Dubai, he grinned. No camels this time, but you will need your passport. She sat up. Wait, what? Get dressed, Mrs. Scott. We're catching a flight in 3 hours. But where? He pressed a finger gently to her lips. Trust me. And somehow she did. 8 hours later, Hannah stood in the arrivals terminal of Florence, Italy. The sky was painted with gold and lavender hues, the Tuscan air warm and rich with the scent of olive trees and old stone. I thought we were going to London, she whispered as Everett led her through the narrow, cobbled streets. I lied, he said shamelessly, but for a good cause. She smiled. So what's the plan? He didn't answer, just squeezed her hand and kept walking. Eventually, they arrived at a small, sun-kissed villa nestled in the hills. Ivy crept up the walls and lemon trees lined the path to the door. "This is our place for the weekend," he said, unlocking the front door with a key pulled from his coat. Hannah stepped inside and was immediately struck by the simplicity. No gold fixtures, no elaborate chandeliers, just light wood floors, soft linen curtains, and silence. The kind of silence that cradles your soul instead of suffocating it. She turned to him, eyes wide. "It's beautiful." "I know," he said, "but it's not the surprise." He opened a side door and led her out onto a stone terrace. Below, the hills rolled endlessly, and far in the distance was a field of sunflowers swaying in the breeze. In the middle of the terrace, a single wooden table had been set. White linen cloth, 2 glasses of wine, and a box. A small velvet box. Hannah froze. Everett didn't say anything at first. Just walked over, picked up the box, and turned to her. "I know we're already married," he said gently, "and I know you said yes once." Well, she felt her heart skip. "But some promises deserve to be renewed. Not because we have to, but because every day with you feels like a new beginning." He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold band, engraved on the inside with the words, "You make me better." Tears welled in her eyes. "I wanted to give you something real. Something not for headlines or the cameras. Just for us. Just for the life we've built from the broken pieces of where we came from." She stepped forward, her fingers trembling as she took the ring. "I never dreamed this big," she whispered. "But somehow you were in every dream I never dared to say out loud." Everett smiled. "So will you say yes again?" She laughed through her tears. "Every day, for the rest of our lives." They sat together that night under a sky dusted with stars, the candlelight flickering between them. They shared memories and made new ones. No reporters, no business calls, no expectations. Only love, only them. And in the quiet of that Italian night, they made a promise not just to stay together, but to keep choosing each other, over and over, even when life got hard. Especially when it got hard. Back in New Jersey a week later, Hannah returned to the Hearth Project with a new sense of purpose. Her staff noticed it right away. There was a peace in her eyes, a gentleness in the way she moved. She no longer seemed to be fighting her past. She had made peace with it. She was no longer proving herself to the world. She was building a new one for others. Would you like to continue to Chapter 15, where Hannah is faced with a major decision that could change the course of her mission and her marriage? The storm came without warning. Not the kind that rolls in with thunder and rain, but the kind that knocks at your front door carrying the past in her purse. Hannah was standing in the community center kitchen, stirring a pot of tomato soup for the children's lunch program, when Carla, one of the volunteers, came rushing in. "There's someone here to see you," she said, breathless. Hannah wiped her hands on a towel. "Tell them I'll be out in just a minute." Carla hesitated. "You might want to come now." That pause, that strange look. Hannah felt her stomach twist. She stepped into the lobby and froze. There, standing like a ghost conjured from memory, was a woman in her late 60s. Her hair was silver, tied back in a no-nonsense bun. Her coat was buttoned to the neck. And her eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, hadn't changed a bit. Hannah's mother. "Hello, Hannah," the woman said, as if no years had passed between them. Hannah didn't move. Not a breath, not a blink. "What are you doing here?" Her voice came out flat, cold. Her mother offered a small, tight smile. "I read about you. In the paper. Your work. Your husband." "I see." There was silence between them. 10 years of it. Thick and brittle, like old glass. "I came because—" Her mother paused, her hands wringing each other. "Because I'm not well." Hannah's heart thudded, but she didn't show it. "I see," she said again. "I didn't come to ask for anything," her mother continued. I wanted to see you once, to tell you I'm sorry." The words hung in the air like smoke. "I spent so long being angry," the woman whispered. "At your father, at life, at you, but I never should have taken it out on you. You didn't deserve that." 1,000 memories surged forward. Cold nights, slammed doors, silence, where there should have been warmth. Hannah closed her eyes. Everett's voice echoed in her mind. "You don't have to forgive anyone who hasn't earned it. But if you ever want to be free, don't carry what broke you." She opened her eyes. I don't know if I believe you, she said quietly, but I hear you. Her mother gave a shaky nod. That's more than I deserve. There was a long pause. Then Hannah gestured toward the chairs in the waiting area. Would you like some tea? The older woman blinked, stunned. Yes, yes, thank you. And just like that, Hannah turned and walked toward the kitchen, her heart pounding, her hands trembling, but her spine steady. This wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about proving to herself that she could face it. That night, Hannah sat in Everett's study, curled up on the couch as he read her expression carefully. Are you okay? He asked. She nodded. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel, but I didn't walk away. Everett crossed the room and knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. You faced something huge today, Hannah. That matters. It doesn't mean you have to open every door she knocked on, but it means you are not trapped anymore. She let out a shaky breath. It's so strange. I thought seeing her would make me feel small again. But I didn't. That's because you're not. The next day, Hannah received a call from a foundation in New York City. They wanted her to speak at a national conference for community leadership. It was a huge opportunity, a platform she'd only ever dreamed of. But there was one problem. The conference was on the same weekend as the grand opening of the new wing at the Hearth Project. A wing she had worked on tirelessly, meant to house 20 women transitioning from abuse shelters. If she left, she would miss the ribbon cutting, the first milestone of the very work she'd dedicated her life to. That night, over dinner, she told Everett, I don't know what to do, she confessed. He didn't answer right away, just watched her, his thumb running slowly over her fingers. Which moment will matter more in 10 years, he finally asked. She bit her lip. The conference could open doors for funding, expansion. Our message could reach more people. And the ribbon cutting? She looked down. That's about the women, the ones already here, the ones who waited for that building to exist. Everett smiled softly. Then you already know. She nodded, because it wasn't about prestige. Not anymore. It was about presence. It was about showing up, especially for those who had no one else. On the day of the ribbon cutting, Hannah stood before a crowd of donors, volunteers, and former residents, holding a pair of silver scissors in her trembling hands. Behind her, the new wing stood like a testament of hope. Bright windows, soft beds, safety. She looked out into the crowd, and there, near the back, stood her mother. Not smiling, just watching. And right beside her, Everett, arms crossed, proud, steady as ever. Hannah took a breath and cut the ribbon. The crowd erupted in applause. But in her heart, there was only stillness. Only one quiet, certain thought. I made it. It was a rainy Tuesday when the envelope arrived. Thick, heavy, sealed with a golden crest. Nothing like the usual pile of donation receipts and program reports. Everett brought it into the study, eyebrows raised. Hannah, he said, holding it up like it was a treasure map. You've got something fancy here. She took it, flipped it over, and immediately noticed the sender. The Harlow Foundation for Global Change. Her breath caught. No way, she murmured. Everett leaned over her shoulder. Who are they? One of the biggest philanthropic groups in the world. They fund life-changing initiatives, but only the most ambitious ones. The ones that dream too big. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single page, handwritten in elegant script. Dear Mrs. Hannah Whitmore, we've been watching your work with the Hearth Project. Your story, your mission, your resolve. We would like to invite you to partner with us on a global level. There's a world of women out there who need what you've built. We want to help you bring it to them. Let's talk. There was a phone number, a name. Vivian Harlow. Hannah stared at the letter. This changes everything. Everett sat beside her, quiet. It's what you always wanted. She nodded. But if I say yes, you can't do both, he finished. The Hearth Project, her soul's work, was still growing, still tender. It needed her. But this was the opportunity to turn her vision into a movement. 2 nights later, Hannah flew to New York. She didn't tell anyone, not even the board, not yet. She needed to see it for herself, feel the weight of it before deciding. Vivian Harlow was as striking as her name. Silver hair twisted into a braid, navy suit, and eyes that saw straight through you. She welcomed Hannah with a warmth that didn't feel rehearsed. "I've been waiting to meet you," Vivian said. "You're doing more with a shoestring budget than some global orgs do with millions." Hannah smiled tightly. "Because we don't have the luxury of waste." Vivian chuckled. "Which is why you're perfect for what we need. We want you to oversee a worldwide initiative. Build homes, train staff, develop programs, just like the hearth, but everywhere. Everywhere." The word made Hannah dizzy. "Where would I need to be?" she asked, even though she already knew the answer. Vivian's smile faded slightly. "Wherever the need is greatest. South America, the Middle East, for at least 2 years, maybe more." A beat passed. "And what happens to my project?" Hannah asked. Vivian didn't hesitate. "We'll fund it. Fully. Hire an interim director. Keep it running." Hannah nodded slowly. Her heart felt heavy. Later that night in her hotel room, she called Everett. "Well?" he asked. "It's bigger than I imagined," she said quietly. And it means I'd be gone. For a long time." There was silence. "I'm proud of you," Everett said, "no matter what you choose. But you don't want me to go. I want you to be happy. But yes, I'd miss you every single day." She felt tears sting her eyes. "I'm afraid," she admitted, "that I'll lose what I've built, that I'll lose us." Everett's voice was soft but steady. "Love doesn't crumble from distance, Hannah. It crumbles when people stop showing up. And I'll keep showing up, no matter what." She closed her eyes and whispered, "I miss you already." Back home, the boardroom at the Hearth Project was filled with whispers. Some were thrilled, others terrified. How could she leave now, just as the organization was finding its footing? "You're the heart of this place," one board member said. "Without you, what will it be, Wavo?" Hannah looked around the room and then out the window at the community garden. It was true, she had been the heart. But maybe it was time to be the spark for something even bigger. Still, she needed to be sure. That night, she walked to the old church building that had been the very first shelter she ever opened. It was quiet, almost holy in its stillness. As she walked the halls, she heard echoes of laughter, crying, footsteps. Women who had passed through, who had found their strength again. One room still had a plaque on the wall. It read, "Safe places make strong people." Hannah touched the words, and just like that, she knew. The next day, she sat across from Everett at their kitchen table. "I'm going," she said. Everett nodded. "I knew you would." She smiled, though her eyes glistened. "It doesn't mean goodbye." "No," he said. "It means we build something bigger than ourselves." The plane touched down in Nairobi just after sunrise. Golden light spilled across the tarmac like spilled honey, and Hannah watched from her window seat, heart trembling. It was her first time in Africa, not just as a visitor, but as a builder of something new, something bigger than her wildest, most youthful ambitions. She clutched the envelope Vivian had given her, the one with her travel documents, itineraries, and a small handwritten note. "This is where change begins. Go slowly. Listen deeply." Vivian Hannah stepped out of the airport into warm, humid air, and the scent of something rich and earthy. It was foreign but strangely familiar, like something she had always carried inside but never had the words for. A man with kind eyes and a bright blue shirt held up a sign, "Miss Hannah Whitmore, Harlow Foundation." She waved, he smiled. "Welcome, madam, I'm David. I'll be driving you." As they drove through the city, Hannah watched life unfold through the dusty windows. Women balancing baskets on their heads, children laughing in schoolyards with cracked walls, vendors selling fruit from worn carts. There was hardship here, but also undeniable joy. She felt it settle deep inside her, like a quiet storm. "I've read all the reports," she said to David, "but nothing compares to seeing it with my own eyes." He glanced at her in the mirror, smile warm. "That's the difference between statistics and stories." Hannah smiled back. "Exactly." Her first stop was Kibera, one of the largest informal settlements in the world, a place the world often called a slum. But when she stepped into the narrow, bustling alleys and felt the heartbeat of the community, women cooking, children running, neighbors laughing over shared jokes, she realized something. This place wasn't broken. It was resilient. Her guide, a local woman named Miriam, walked beside her, explaining the challenges they faced. lack of clean water, safety concerns, unemployment. But she also spoke of hope. We don't want someone to save us, Miriam said, adjusting the headscarf tied neatly over her braids. We want someone to walk beside us. That's all. Hannah nodded, her throat tight. I'm not here to lead, she said quietly. I'm here to learn. For the next 3 months, Hannah lived in a modest apartment near the edge of the city. No luxury hotels, no catered meals, just a bed, a desk, and a small kitchen that overlooked the tin rooftops below. She woke early, met with local women's cooperatives, listened to teachers at underfunded schools, sat cross-legged on floors with young mothers who told her stories that shattered and mended her heart at once. She wasn't the savior, she was the student. And the more she learned, the more she realized. Her work back home had been just a seed. This was the forest. Every night she wrote letters to Everett, sometimes by hand, sometimes by email. Today I helped a mother apply for a microloan. She wants to open a sewing shop. Her daughter sat next to her, drawing pictures of dresses. I miss the smell of your coffee in the morning. I miss you more than I can say. Everett always replied, I'm so proud of you. I cleaned the garage today. It only took 5 hours. You'd be impressed, or horrified. I counted the days, 61 since you left. But I'm not counting down, I'm counting forward. Hannah would sometimes fall asleep with her phone pressed to her chest, holding his words like a prayer. 6 months in, Hannah was invited to speak at a local women's gathering. It wasn't formal, just a circle of woven mats under a mango tree and 30 women of all ages, waiting to hear her story. She stood, unsure how to begin. I've spent most of my life thinking that helping others meant fixing something broken, she said softly. But being here has taught me that people aren't broken. Systems are. Opportunities are. But people are brilliant. There was a pause, then murmurs of agreement. One woman, her eyes wet with emotion, said, You understand. And for the first time, Hannah felt like she truly did. Meanwhile, back in the States, the Hearth Project had grown. Everett sent updates weekly. A new shelter had opened in Phoenix. A young woman who once lived in the original house had started her own initiative in Denver. Hannah's legacy was no longer hers alone. It had become a movement, carried by many hands. But still, every time she heard Everett's voice on a call, her heart ached. I'm proud of you, he said one night. But I'm selfish too. She laughed gently. You want me home. I want you, he whispered. And she knew sooner or later she would return. Would you like to continue to Chapter 18, where Hannah must choose between expanding globally with Vivian or returning home to merge her two worlds into one unified mission? The sun spilled gold across the Nairobi skyline as Hannah stood barefoot on the balcony of her modest apartment. 6 months ago, this city had been a blur beyond the window of a plane. Now it felt like part of her soul, but this morning something was different. In her hand was a formal letter from Vivian Rhodes, sealed in ivory parchment and bearing the Harlow Foundation crest. Dear Hannah, the board has voted unanimously to appoint you as the new director of global outreach. You will oversee all international initiatives with the power to shape their future. We want you to dream big. Come to London. Let's begin. Her breath caught in her throat. It was everything she had worked for: power, reach, vision, legacy. But as she folded the letter and placed it carefully on the small wooden table beside her, her eyes drifted to her phone. Everett's message glowed softly on the screen. The kids miss you, so do I. The house feels too quiet. Even the dog waits at the door every night. But I know you're doing something beautiful. The weight of two worlds pressed on her chest. She was standing in the gap between them. That afternoon, Hannah met Miriam at their favorite tea shop on the corner of Kenyatta Avenue, where hibiscus flowers spilled over the fence like spilled paint. You're leaving, aren't you? Miriam asked gently, eyes full of knowing. Hannah didn't answer right away. I got an offer, a big one. Miriam sipped her spiced chai, nodding. I've seen this before, she said softly. People come, they fall in love with the place, with the people. Then they get called back to the life they left behind. But you're different. Hannah smiled faintly. Am I? You don't belong to one place, Miriam said, setting down her cup. You belong to the bridge between them. The words echoed in her chest. She thought of Everett, of the home she helped build, of the barefoot children she read stories to, of the way her heart ached equally for both. Maybe Miriam was right. She didn't have to choose. She could build that bridge. By the end of the week, Hannah stood in front of a crowded room in London, addressing the Harlow Foundation board. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back, her voice steady and clear. "I accept the position," she said, "but on one condition." Vivian raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "I don't want to run this from a corner office in a glass tower. I want to build a network of women, of mothers, of dreamers and doers, from Nairobi to Newark. I want to create homes and voices. I want to merge the Hearth Project with the global work you're already doing. One heartbeat, one mission, one community." There was a long silence, then Vivian smiled. "That's why we chose you." 3 months later, Hannah was home. Home, but not the same. She kissed Everett on the front porch under the porch light, arms wrapped around his waist, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Did you miss me?" she whispered against his chest. He chuckled, holding her tighter. "Only every second of every day." Oliver ran up to her, older, taller, braces gleaming. "Mom, you're here." She dropped to her knees and held him close, burying her face in his hoodie, breathing him in. It felt like the world finally aligned. The Hearth Global Initiative launched the next spring. Their first event, a joint build in Nairobi and St. Louis. 2 homes raised in one day, streamed live, bricks laid with stories. Miriam flew in, so did Vivian. And Everett? He stood beside Hannah on the stage, hand in hers. "You did it," he whispered as applause filled the park. Hannah smiled, eyes glassy. "We did." Final chapter, a garden built from ashes. And years passed. Children grew, gray hairs appeared, but the work never stopped. And neither did the love. Hannah and Everett hosted dinner every Sunday, open-door policy, full table, loud laughter. The porch light always stayed on. And in the backyard, under a fig tree they planted together, Hannah built a bench with her own 2 hands. A plaque sat on it, worn from time and sun, built from ashes, grown in grace, a place where every story belongs.